Culture hero. Who am I? Sooner or later, most of us ask oneself existential questions, such as who am I? What am I doing here? What is the point of all of this? And not least, what do I want to be? If nothing else, these issues tend to make themselves reminded as one grows aware of one's own mortality. Today's article will therefore be from a more personal perspective, trying to explain how I see my identity and some of my goals here in life. Every real worldview has an image of the objectives to which one should strive to achieve, a model of the good life. Vital worldviews are characterized by the fact that these goals is something more than the average human life, something challenging but noble. Less vital, quote-unquote, worldviews, as the late modern, seems to instead to suggest that the good life is the life where one avoids setbacks and challenges, and calmly can follow their soap operas, eating good food without getting fat, and sometimes be horrified over extremists. Such quote-unquote worldviews are characterized by the fact that they do not move beyond the purely biological and possibly even the purely moralistic conformity. A late modernist would therefore see with incomprehension and disapproval of the life models or lifestyles and the ideals that drove some of our ancestors to call themselves as the noble ones, since this would seem unnecessarily difficult and hard. Against the late modern life model, one can then compare another model for a dignified life, and it is the model that permeated every traditional civilization under thousands of years. So this includes the North European culture I belong to. This model's goal can, with a term borrowed from anthropology and religion historians, be called culture hero. This is an approach, a perspective one immediately encounter as soon as one read one of the Icelandic stories or sagas, or a Greek myth, but it is there so obvious that as a late modern reader one easily miss it. The first time I seriously ran into it in a context where it was put to words was the old Nietzscheans in the now abandoned Freikorps, who compared organic cultures and their culture heroes against a one-directive sterilized world order. It should be mentioned that Freikorps used a concept both broader and more specific than it used within the academic world. Freikorps saw both the Taliban's spiritual and military leader Mullah Omar and Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic as representatives for their peoples, who tried to defend their lives and honor against the New World Order. Freikorps' insights was vastly superior to everything the left, both communists, anarchists, and socialists, ever could come up with, whether it was the amorphous and operational driven quantity, which they believed would destroy an equally amorphous capitalism, or if their goal was that equally faceless and sterile classes would fight each other, because Freikorps realized that the late modern capitalism and consumer society was invading both culture and personality. This in turn means that the resistance will take new forms, which derives from one's own culture, and it was eventually this which slowly led me from a diffuse anarcho-Nietzschean life to a identitist traditionalist worldview. What is a person? The identitist worldview and all traditional civilizations that has existed historically have an understanding, an insight of how a sound and honorable person gets shaped or formed, an insight which the late modern liberalism lacks. This insight is expressed poetically and mythically, as in every human being simply is but a link in a long chain, where both ancestors and descendants are included. Man is born into an organic community, a culture in the real sense, and from this one gets the values that will make you a person, myths, and a sense of meaning in life. There is no brainwashing involved or uncriticized conformism, but a long process of gradually getting to know these values, examine them, perhaps rebel against them, and adapt them and integrate them with one's own personality. During this process, there is also much room for personal interpretations and innovation. For example, the European artists who could create new art because they knew and understood their tradition and their culture inside and out. Similarly, each generation of Europeans have historically been forced to update their culture as they faced new situations and challenges. Each generation has also succeeded in this until some time in modern times when large and dominant groups instead turned against it. The late modern liberalism has here tried to replace organic communities such as family, local community, church, and ethnos with artificial communities as kindergarten and a TV viewing public. But it has quickly been proved that the individuals were shaped by kindergarten, the school, mass consumption, consumerism, and Big Brother watching leave much to be desired. Secondly, they are psychologically not always very happy and unable to reproduce themselves. They also lack civil courage, solidarity, and self control. Nothing suggests that this will be solved by more freedom or even more propaganda, as long as the organic communities constantly gets undermined by the market and the state. This has even been recognized by some socialists, and the American Telos director Paul Picon put it like following: a plurality of cultures can coexist without either destroying or absorbing one another only if embodied in organic communities, not merely isolated individuals. In the latter case, the outcome is not only the gradual erasure of cultural particularity, but the very decomposition of individuality, which explains the inextricable connection in the US between cultural homogenization through the culture industry, the rise of the therapeutic industry, and the progressive disintegration of communities. As Hegel originally described in the Philosophy of Right, one of the earliest attempts to transcend Enlightenment social philosophy, organic communities providing meaning and identity are necessary conditions for the development of an autonomous individuality, made possible only through the successful internalization of collective cultural forms and, subsequently, self-determining civil societies of free citizens. Unless these communal frameworks are already given, social life is impossible, other than as it obtains in Brave New World, a gulag of guards, or administrators, and amoral sub-individuals or clients, operating in a context of contradictory rules and regulations whose sheer number and complexity make compliance increasingly difficult. As an identitist, one views oneself as a link in a living, organic, biological, spiritual chain, a chain one do not wish to end or be broken with oneself. One sees oneself as the result of hundreds of generations pursued the struggle to defend, preserve, and develop their traditions, their culture, their values, simply put, their blood. To think as liberals and socialists which believe that we can escape from oneself becomes a ridiculous idea. On the contrary, the goal is to explore one's culture and one's identity and realizing this into the new era. I am a Scandinavian, and it is an insult, both to myself and to them, if I try to be an African American. It is also not possible. By contrast, I can, and I should, explore my Scandinavian roots. This insight is part of what it means to grow up. You realize that life is full of choices, and all choices lead to some results and exclude others. I can, in other words, not simultaneously be Swedish and African American. It is the harsh reality. The late modern project can in many ways be seen as an infantile revolt against this reality, against the very reality principle, against the compulsion to make real, that is, irreversible, choices. This also means a sense of pride, but not the chauvinistic pride that many anti-racists are so afraid of. On the contrary, it is a pride with a sense of responsibility. To be the result of hundreds of worthy generations' struggles and hardships is something that creates a sense of responsibility, organic, noble, honorable, and valuable duties. To borrow a concept from postmodernists, one is a part of and included as Swedish, Västgöte, and Western European in a long story, and its responsibility that lies on your shoulders to ensure that it does not have an unfortunate end or disgraceful, unhonorable elements introduced to it. What is a culture hero? A person is, in other words, more than just an individual. For where an individual may be controlled by volatile impulses from a TV, a person is rooted in an organic community and its values and traditions. The old peasant society, for example, was full of these honorable people. Every culture contains archetypes for the best a man or a woman can be. In peasant society, for example, everyone was aware of how one expected that an honorable father or mother should be, just as there likewise were an exception of how a priest, or an expectation of how a priest, a king, or a warrior should be. Such models is still spreading, but in the consumer society, the situation is far more confusing, and it is difficult to know if the idea is that one should be horrified over a person as Britney Spears or Paris Hilton, or whether to imitate their behavior. Cultures also tend to have mythical figures, which in a concentrated form represents all the best within a culture, a symbol of the very essence of the culture. Often it is demigods and the founders of peoples or dynasties. Interesting is how Mircea Eliade describes how the cultural members had these characters as role models and models. He mentions among others fishermen from a people in New Guinea who, when they were going out fishing, imitated the mythical hero Aoris' preparations. With one of the fishermen it went so far that he not only imitated the mythical hero's preparations, but identified himself fully with him during fishing. Eliade uses the concept of the eternal return, which perhaps is best known from Nietzsche. What he means is that in a traditional society there exists an archetype, which periodically is realized by individuals of the people. There are, for example, uh, archetypal of how a good ruler should be, and this archetypal is realized from time to time by real kings. The number of archetypes is normally sufficient for there to be mythical role models for everything from craftsmen and mystics to warriors and mothers. In our time, this is, after all, still very common. There are a lot of inspirations from the Old Norse stories, the Viking or Carolines' achievements, which affected their life and their behavior. Unlike within more traditional communities, one rarely believes in the existence of a higher reality than the purely earthly Midgard, and we do not believe that knights or emperors literally are sleeping under a mountain in anticipation of their people to end up in their hour of distress, but apart from this, the similarities are significant.